Margaret watched her son try on his new suit with a proud smile. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark-haired, tomorrow, her boy was getting married. It still felt unreal. Craig studied his reflection in the mirror, then nodded in satisfaction. The suit fit him perfectly. Nice suit, he said, turning to his mother. The color's sharp, looks expensive. It was expensive, Margaret thought, but instead she replied, I'm glad you like it. I'll probably shed a tear the moment I see you all dressed up tomorrow at the wedding. The wedding? Craig finally tore his eyes from the mirror. Mom, you're not actually planning on coming, are you? We agreed you wouldn't be there. Agreed? Margaret blinked, confused. Sweetheart, I thought you were joking. Joking? Craig began pacing nervously. Have you forgotten what Melissa's parents are like? The whole guest list is going to be the city's elite. You'll just feel out of place, like some poor relative, and I'll be worried the whole time. Mom, do you really want to ruin the most important day of my life? He sat down beside her on the couch, took her hand gently, and squeezed it. Mom, just imagine how shabby you'll look next to all those polished society ladies. My heart would break from the humiliation. We'll come by the next day. You can congratulate us at home. Have some tea or champagne. Give us your gift then. The words stabbed Margaret's heart. Her own son was so ashamed of her that he'd rather appear like an orphan at his own wedding. Why would I look shabby? She protested. I made an appointment with a good stylist. I'll get my nails done. I even bought a proper dress. What dress? That old blue thing? Craig snapped, pacing again. Listen. He stopped and faced her squarely. If you can't understand it politely, let me say it plainly. I don't want you at my wedding. Call me cruel, but I'm ashamed that my mother works as a janitor. I don't want you embarrassing me in front of Melissa's family with your worn-out look. Is that clear enough? Margaret was stunned into silence. Craig grabbed his garment bag and backpack, walked to the door, and before leaving, turned back one last time. Let me repeat myself. Don't come to the ceremony. Nobody there wants to see you. Hours later, as dusk settled outside, Margaret was still sitting on the couch in shock. She couldn't even cry at first. The tears came only later, when she turned on the light and pulled out an old family photo album from the drawer. Margaret flipped through the worn pages of the old family album, and with every photograph, memories came crashing down so hard it was difficult to breathe. A faded picture, a 2-year-old little girl with bright blue eyes, wearing a second-hand dress far too big for her tiny frame. Beside her stood a thin, distracted-looking woman, with a foolish smile, clearly drunk, even in the blurry photo. Margaret was only 2.5 when the state took her away, and her mother disappeared from her life forever. As she grew older, she never once tried to find that woman. Why would I? She always thought. Another photo, a group shot at the state orphanage. 10-year-old Margaret, wild golden curls tumbling over her shoulders, stood in the second row, third from the left. Life in that orphanage in Ohio was anything but sweet. The staff stole food, the caretakers barked curses, and the director encouraged the older kids to bully the younger ones. Nobody cared how discipline was enforced, only that it was. A different picture, 3 smiling teenage girls in waitress uniforms, posing outside a roadside diner, with a crooked sign that read, Highway Stop Cafe. That was where Margaret had found her first job after high school. The pay wasn't much, but tips made the difference, and a pretty quick-moving girl like her brought in generous ones. 12-hour shifts were exhausting, but she never let it break her spirit. Independence suited her. Her rented room in a shared house was bright and spacious, her elderly landlords kind, and somehow, she discovered a hidden talent, the ability to dress beautifully on a shoestring budget. Margaret would buy clothes at thrift stores, alter and reshape them, turning cast-offs into fashionable outfits. Then came the photo that made her heart flutter even now, a sunny meadow, a flower crown on her head, laughter spilling from her lips, as a dark-haired young man held her close. That summer, her life had changed forever. It was at the cafe. One hectic morning, trays balanced in both hands, Margaret tripped and spilled a full glass of tomato juice onto the shirt of a customer sitting by the window. The bright red stain spread quickly across what was clearly an expensive shirt. Horrified, she froze. Before she could stammer an apology, the cafe owner stormed over, shouting at her and threatening to fire her on the spot. But the young man only smiled. "Don't worry," he said, handing her his car keys. "I've got a clean shirt in the back seat. Could you grab my backpack for me?" The owner snatched the keys before Margaret could move. "I'll get it," he barked. "No need for this girl to wreck your car too." When the man finally introduced himself, Margaret felt her cheeks flush. "My name's Mark," he said, extending his hand. Tall, athletic, with playful gray eyes, and a charming smile. That was how she met the love of her life. After that day at the cafe, Margaret and Mark became inseparable. He was a college student, studying economics at Ohio State, and had just finished his summer exams. Every day, they found time to see each other. In July, Mark even took Margaret on her very first real vacation. She didn't own a passport, so instead of going abroad, they spent 10 magical days in Florida, walking the beaches, and laughing late into the night. Mark introduced her to his college friends, and together they had barbecues, went swimming, and lived as if the world belonged only to them. For Margaret, it was the happiest, most carefree summer of her life. She had never known such joy before. By August they were already whispering about marriage, but when fall arrived, all those golden dreams collapsed in an instant. One afternoon, Mark's cousin spotted him walking downtown with Margaret, her thrift store clothes neatly altered, but still nothing compared to the designer labels his family was used to. That single sighting set everything in motion. Mark's family was furious. His father was the city's mayor, his mother sat on the board of a local charity foundation, his aunt was a lawyer, and his grandmother chaired half the social events in town. And every single one of them despised the idea of Mark tying himself to a girl from an orphanage, with nothing to her name. The phone calls started almost immediately. Margaret couldn't go a single day without one of his relatives calling her, insulting her, threatening her, demanding she leave him alone. Once his cousin even stormed into the cafe, throwing a milkshake in Margaret's face in front of customers. Neighbors later whispered that strangers had been asking questions about her. An elderly man in her building confirmed it. "Some woman came by, offered me and my wife money if we'd say you're a drug addict, or worse. I threw her out on the spot," he said. Margaret never told Mark about any of it. She knew he was under enormous pressure already, especially since he'd been accepted into a student exchange program that could send him abroad. She could see the worry in his eyes, the way he sometimes searched her face for answers, but when she smiled at him, he always sighed in relief. Then came the call that shook her to her core. "This is Richard Collins," a stern voice said over the line. "Mark's father. You're going to break up with my son before he leaves. Tell him you've met someone else. If you don't, you'll regret it." Before Margaret could reply, the mayor hung up. She clutched the phone, trembling. She would have given her life for Mark. How could she abandon the one person she loved more than men? When Mark finally flew off to London for his exchange semester, Margaret's world collapsed. Within weeks she was falsely accused by her cafe boss, a man bribed by the mayor himself. They said she'd stolen money. Shocked and unprepared, she didn't stand a chance in court. The trial was a farce, the state lawyer half asleep, the prosecutor relentless. Margaret kept waiting for Mark to come back and defend her, but instead she heard whispers that he was continuing his studies in England. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison. It was behind those gray prison walls that Margaret discovered she was pregnant. Margaret served 18 months before being released early on parole. By then, she was carrying the greatest burden and blessing of her life, her unborn child. She was lucky the state hadn't taken the baby away, but once free, the reality hit her hard. Who would hire a young woman with a criminal record and an infant? Doors slammed shut everywhere she went. Her old neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, a retired schoolteacher, helped her place little Craig in a church daycare through one of his former students. That small act of kindness allowed Margaret to work, and so she did, endlessly. She scrubbed floors at a restaurant, cleaned offices in the evenings, picked up weekend shifts at a car wash, and sewed pillowcases and sheets at night, just to scrape together enough money. She never looked back. The past was too painful, and Mark, the man she once thought she'd spend her life with, had long since disappeared. Rumors reached her that his father had taken a promotion in Washington, D.C., that Mark had married a glamorous city woman. Margaret cried for a whole night, then wiped her tears, and went back to work. She had a son to raise, and that became her only purpose. Craig grew up to be a handsome boy with striking gray eyes like his father's. Margaret poured everything she had into him. Whenever he wanted a toy, she found the money. When he needed new clothes, she sacrificed her own meals to buy them. If he dreamed of the latest gadget, she picked up another cleaning shift until she had enough. Never once did she complain of being tired. At dinner, she always pushed the best pieces of food onto his plate. Craig grew up believing life's comforts simply appeared, never stopping to wonder what they cost his mother. And perhaps that was her mistake. Now sitting alone in her living room, the night before his wedding, Margaret felt the full weight of it. Her only child, the boy she had raised with her bare hands, was ashamed of her. Ashamed enough to forbid her from attending the most important day of his life. She closed the photo album and looked at his portrait on the wall. "For 25 years I gave you everything, son," she whispered. "But this time I'll do something for myself. Forgive me." She pulled out a small box, where she kept her savings, along with her monthly paycheck. It was enough for a salon visit, a new dress, and a makeover. She was going to walk into that wedding on her own terms. When Margaret walked into the wedding hall, the room fell silent for a moment. She had always looked younger than her age, but after a trip to the salon, a professional hairstyle, and a tailored royal blue dress, she looked radiant, like she'd turned back the clock 10 years. Men stole glances at her, women whispered in surprise. Margaret's eyes welled with tears, as she watched her son, tall and serious in his tuxedo, standing at the altar with his beautiful bride, Melissa. "I'm glad I came," she thought, "no matter what he says." After the ceremony, guests crowded around the newlyweds with congratulations. Craig slipped through the crowd, grabbed his mother's arm, and hissed, "So my request meant nothing to you? At least tell me you won't show up at the reception." "I won't," Margaret replied calmly. "I've already seen what I needed to see." "Mrs. Carter." Melissa rushed over, glowing with joy. "You look absolutely stunning. My parents insist you join us at the reception." Margaret forced a smile. "Thank you, sweetheart, but I really should go." "What do you mean go?" Melissa frowned. "Craig, what's happening?" Craig plastered on a fake smile. "Nothing, honey. Mom's just shy." "Right, Mom. You'll come with us." Margaret sighed, but nodded. She wouldn't embarrass her son in front of his bride. Later, when it was time for the parents to speak, Margaret took the microphone. "My dear children, be happy. Love each other for a lifetime." Her voice trembled with sincerity, and the guests applauded warmly. As she stepped up the small stage, she nearly collided with a tall man in an expensive suit. His face froze in shock. "It can't be," he whispered. "Margaret?" After all these years, her heart stopped. "Mark, what are you doing here?" "My business partner is the bride's father," he said, still staring at her. "And you have a handsome son." "Margaret, we need to talk." Nervously, he took her hand. They stepped aside by the window, away from the noise of the crowd. "You're alone? No husband?" Margaret asked cautiously. "I've been divorced for 10 years," Mark admitted. "No kids." They talked for nearly an hour, filling in the decades of silence. Mark explained how his father had lied, telling him Margaret had left with another man for New York. He had even sent friends to the cafe, where the staff, bribed and pressured, confirmed the false story. Broken-hearted, Mark had stayed abroad, later marrying, but never finding happiness. "I was only ever happy with you," he confessed quietly. Margaret blinked back tears. "Let's not talk about the 7 years. This is a wedding after all. Instead, why don't you invite me to dance?" As the orchestra struck up a waltz, the two of them glided across the floor, turning heads. Craig stood frozen, staring at his mother, really seeing her for the first time. She wasn't the tired janitor he was ashamed. She was a beautiful woman, who had sacrificed her entire youth for him. For the first time in his life, Craig felt ashamed of himself. As the music ended, Margaret slipped her arm through Mark's, ready to step outside for fresh air. Craig, stunned and restless, rushed after them. "Mom, where are you going?" he demanded. Margaret looked him straight in the eye. I'm leaving. Isn't that what you wanted? Craig's chest tightened. Mom, wait, I'm sorry. But who is this man? You don't even know him. Margaret gave a soft, almost defiant smile. Don't I? With this man, I'd walk to the ends of the earth if I had to. Craig, meet your father. The words hit like a thunderclap. Craig froze, eyes darting between Margaret and Mark. My father. Mark's throat tightened. He nodded slowly. Yes, son. I should have been there. I should have fought harder for both of you. But I was lied to, manipulated. I believed you were gone forever. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The weight of 25 years of silence hung between them. Then Margaret, with quiet determination, broke it. I think, she said, steady and calm, the three of us have a very long and very difficult conversation ahead. Craig's face flushed with shame. For the first time in his life, he saw his mother not as the woman who scrubbed floors for his sake, but as a strong, beautiful woman who had carried an unbearable burden alone and never complained. And for the first time, he also saw the man who was his father, not a ghost from a story never told, but flesh and blood, standing right before him. The wedding celebration went on behind them, laughter and clinking glasses, echoing through the hall. But for Margaret, Mark and Craig, a new story had just begun, one of truth, reconciliation, and the hope of finally being a family.